Switch it off. Turns off.
Yeah. Really breaks it. I know the answer. Like I should. Yeah. Like I'm just the best person.
Yeah.
And then when it's like, please take a look at that process and has changed.
Especially in compliance.
No, there was.
Pretty heavy handed.
Your mind is a lot. Timelines.
Right. I mean, that makes sense.
It's 5:30.
Okay, I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is Vista City Council special meeting, February 3rd, 2026. And we'll start with roll call.
Council members Hart,
Here.
Hughes absent, Newport,
Here.
Wilms,
Here.
Isbell absent, and Henshaw.
Here. Thank you. We have 4 councilmen present, so we have a quorum. For new business, before I go into the ordinance, we're going to have a couple presentations. Jason?
Mayor, I was just going to say, perhaps if you go ahead and suspend the rules to read the ordinance by title only and get into the first reading.
Okay.
So moved.
This is, let me say this is an incredibly important piece of legislation. So it's very, very important that the record be very clear about what we're doing. So when you say so moved, I assume you mean you're moving to suspend the rules of order and procedure to allow all ordinances on the agenda to be read by title only. Is that correct?
The words right out of my mouth.
I don't see a red light.
Okay. Thank you.
Right.
Is there a second?
No, second. I apologize.
That was Larry Wilms and Craig Honcho. Roll call vote to suspend the rules of order and procedure to allow all ordinances on the agenda to be read by title only.
Council members Wilms,
Yes.
Hanschel,
Yes.
Hart,
Yes.
Newport.
Yes.
Motion carried 6-0. Thank you for that.
Mayor, it did not pass 6-0. It passed
Or 4-0,
4-0.
sorry. Yeah. Let's see. So I'll go ahead and read the ordinance for the presentations. Ordinance, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of sales and use tax bonds for the purpose of financing and refinancing the cost of capital improvements, pledging collections of a 1% sales and use tax to pay the principal of and interest on the bonds, prescribing other matters relating thereto, and declaring an emergency. We were going to have a couple presentations. Cheryl Schluterman from Raymond James.
Good evening, Council and Mayor. If you recall, we've been working on this since around August, and the voters approved the sales tax extension of 1% and then the various capital improvements that the ordinance covers today. And the last time I was here, we showed in the calculation, we were estimating an all-in interest rate of 3.73% with a final maturity of 2041, expecting those bonds to pay off by 2034, assuming zero growth and no decline in your sales tax collections. Since that time, we have done a presentation with S&P to renew your rating and get a rating on these bonds, and they affirmed that with a AA rating with a stable outlook. So that is wonderful. We worked really hard to get that structured so that you would have 2 times coverage in order to achieve that, and it speaks to the how well run the city is and the growth of the area. So congratulations on that. And then today we had a pricing call yesterday with the mayor and Kim and the underwriters, Bob Wright with Cruz and Associates and Kevin Fott with Stevens Inc. and myself and our desk, and to talk about what we expected the pricing to look like. At that time, we were estimating 3.77% overall AIC, the all-in interest rate. And we were able to shorten the final maturity to March 1st of 2040. So we reduced that by 1 year. And then expected payoff of 2033. So also reducing that in some of our structuring. And we had an order period from 9 to 10:30 this morning. And we were able to get you an all-in rate, final rate of 3.76%. Everything else basically stayed the same. Again, so it's a 14-year final maturity, and you're most likely going to pay that off in 7 years or less, assuming no growth in the sales tax. So regarding the sale, it went very, very well. We had approximately $25 million of bonds that we were offering, and we had $66.7 million in orders. So we had several of the maturities that were quite a bit oversubscribed. We did have one maturity that the underwriters were willing to underwrite, which means they were buying those bonds and taking those in-house to then try to sell. So we appreciate that from them. Bob from Cruz gave me a list of the orders, and I'll pass those out just to show you the diversity in, we had 22 institutional buyers, investors of your bonds, and then some individual accounts. So I'll pass that around now. So we will get a final pricing book to you later this week with some more details in it, but that is a summary of what occurred. So then today, the mayor gave his verbal award earlier today, and then with your approval of the ordinance tonight, we will sign the BPA, which is the official purchase of the underwriters of your bonds. And then we will close on March 17th, and you will have your funds for your projects. Any questions before Ryan? Ryan will come up in just a second. Yeah.
Can you give me the Reader's Digest version of what I'm looking at?
Yeah, so these are the different investors, and what this shows that you had a significant number of different investors interested in the bonds, and that just helps with putting some pressure on the interest rate and allowing us to get you the interest rate that we did. So you can see that there's some local Arkansas banks on here, but there's also quite a other, larger variety of investors as well. So, but yeah, this is the total orders, and then what we have to do is Bob and Kevin worked with the investors and got them to, we couldn't fill all of them because there's not enough bonds, so we were able to negotiate some of the basis points down on some of the maturities. So yeah, that's all. It's just a representation of who all bought your bonds.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions?
The only comment is it looks from this list here, these are your institutional list, you've got a pretty broad cross-section. You really do, you have the insurance industry as well as others, so.
Yeah, they did a great job today. The taxable were very popular. We don't see those a lot, so the taxable bonds went very fast, and they had to work a little harder to get some of the tax exempt sold, but other than that one maturity, it was pretty much fully subscribed. Any other questions before Ryan explains the ordinance?
Okay, next we have Ryan, thank you, Cheryl. Next we have Ryan Bowman from Friday Aldridge and Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. I think that Wanda actually handed out a copy of the red line bond ordinance from what you had in your agenda packet. That actually completes the ordinance following your bond sale this morning. And so I'd like to just walk through the changes that were made from what you have in your agenda packet. But just to refresh your memory on at the election in November, the voters approved bonds for 6 different purposes, and those are listed in A through F there on page 1. And so there were bonds to finance the fire and city administration complex, fire improvements, street improvements, police improvements, and then the refunding of the 2020 sales tax bonds, as well as the franchise fee issue that we did back in 2024. And so if you look over on page 2, in the second whereas clause, we're issuing a total of $25,195,000 in bonds between Series A and Series B. Series A is for the refunding of the 2020 bonds and the 2024 bond, so it's all refunding. That principal amount is $8,735,000. The remaining $16,460,000 are for the new money projects that the voters approved back in November. If you look at page 2, the whereas clause there in the middle of that page, that is the purchase price for the Series A bonds and the purchase price for the Series B bonds. Turning over to page 3 in section 4, we again added the principal amount of the Series A bonds and the principal amount of the Series B bonds, $8,735,000 and $16,460,000. And then at the bottom of page 3, you'll see the maturity schedule for the Series A bonds. Those are the taxable bonds, again, for the refunding of the 2020 and the 24 bonds, and those mature on March 1 of 2032. And then at the top of page 4, you'll see the maturity schedule for the Series B bonds, which are the tax-exempt bonds, and those mature from 2032 through 2040. Now keep in mind that those are the scheduled maturity on the bond issue. The collections of the 1% tax that the voters approved back in November, all of those sales tax collections must be used to pay debt service on this bond issue. So let's just say, for example, you're collecting $100,000 in sales tax collections in a year, and your debt service is only $80,000. Well, that extra $20,000 will be used to pay off the bonds early from the back end of the maturities. So what you see at the bottom of page 2 or page 3 and the top of page 4 are the scheduled maturities. And as Cheryl mentioned, based on collections for the past 12 months and no growth in those sales tax collections, the bonds will be paid off in 2033. So that's 7 years earlier than what is shown here on pages 3 and 4. And again, with growth in sales tax collections, as you would hope you would have here in the city, that maturity date would go even earlier. Continuing on to the changes that were made in the ordinance, over on page 7, starting on page 7 is the form of the Series A bond, and on page 8 we again inserted the principal amount of the A bonds as well as the ordinance number 2026-03, assuming that you adopt this ordinance tonight. On pages 9 and 10 are the various principal amounts that are coming due in 2029, 2030, 2031, and 2032. And on page 12 is the form of bond for the Series 2026B bond, and the same changes are made to the Series 2026B bond. Again, the principal amount, $16,460,000, is added on page 13, and then on page 14, the various principal amounts for the maturities in 36 through 2040. Continuing on, the next change will be at the top of page 19 in section 10. We are issuing all the bonds that the voters approved for the fire and city administration complex, for the streets, and for the police improvements. But we are only issuing a small portion of what the voters approved for the fire improvements. And so you, as a city, are reserving the right in this section of the ordinance to issue in the future up to $5,385,000 for the remainder of the fire projects that the voters approved. There was not a need to issue all those bonds for fire today, and so the plan is to issue those bonds in the next couple of years for the remainder of the projects that the voters approved. And so we would go back through this process again at that time without, of course, having to go back to the voters. Over on page 21 in section 15, I'll just point out to you that the bond trustee, which is Bank OZK in Little Rock, they will serve as the trustee of the bond issue, and they will actually hold the various project funds called construction funds. And there will be a construction fund for each of the 4 projects that the voters approved. The money will be held by Bank OZK. They will then pay the third party once they receive a requisition and an invoice from the city. So it's the same procedure that we had back in 2020. That money is not actually held, those millions of dollars are not held by the city. They are actually held by the bond trustee, and then there's a requisition process that's laid out in section 15 by which those monies will be paid by the trustee to the third party vendors. Over on page 25 in sections 27 and 28, we have allocated the principal amounts of the Series A and B bonds between the various purposes that the voters approved. Those are all the changes to the ordinance from what you had in your agenda packet. I will note that there is an emergency clause, section 33, so assuming you adopt the ordinance tonight, I would ask that you separately approve the emergency clause so that the ordinance will go into effect immediately, and the mayor would then be authorized to sign the bond purchase agreement with Cruz and Associates and Stevens as the underwriters, locking in those interest rates that Cheryl mentioned. Again, thank you for the opportunity to serve as bond counsel to the city. I'm happy to answer any questions you have with respect to the ordinance.
Shay.
Did you mention there are
contract changes that we should see on page 7?
7. On page 7, no.
Okay, great.
No, on 7.
Travis?
Can you explain the hold off on the fire department? Which portion of the voter passed legislation are we holding off on for a future date?
Yeah, that's probably a better question for city staff, so I would defer to the city with respect to that.
Yeah, what we did is, you're supposed to complete all these projects in 3 years, 3 years from when the bond closes. So we held off on fire station number 5, and the pumper truck, which you folks actually approved in December, has a 35-month lead time, which is less than 3 years by a little bit. But we thought, well, just to be safe, we might as well put the pumper truck in there with fire station number 5. And then, when we have our second closing, right now we're thinking 2028, but, it's really open to when that might be. But we want to make sure we can get it done in 3 years. So we thought, well, let's hold off on those couple of things, and then we can have a second closing later and take those down. But that was the reason for it, really, was the pressure being done in 3 years. And with fire station number 5, we thought, well, this will give us some more time to work out the details and whatnot.
It's 3 years from the closing?
It's 3 years from closing,
Yeah.
that's correct.
Thank you, Mayor.
So, Larry?
And when you say you need to spend that, I think, I'm not sure, but I thought that the requirement was that you have to have a commitment. In other words, you have to have a contract that's been awarded, that's a commitment. And so that has to be done before the end of the 3-year time frame.
The money has to be out the door within 3 years.
It has to be paid out?
Correct, that's correct. And you have to either have a contract to spend or spend at least 5% of the bond proceeds within 6 months. So that's where you're allowed to have a contract to meet that requirement, but the 3-year requirement is to have that money actually
Is
spent.
that an Arkansas law or is
That is a federal tax law.
That's a federal law.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was under the assumption you only had to have it under contract by the end of the time frame of 3 years.
The IRS makes it out the door, yes, sir.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
And most of these things we feel, pretty confident on, like the street paving for a couple of years, and the police cars are for a couple of years, and the communication towers, we feel confident we definitely have done well before that. So, the street already put in for a lot of equipment at our last meeting, so, we feel good about not having any problems with the time limits. But
And you'll recall that back in August, when we actually called the election, we adopted a resolution that authorized you to go ahead and spend city funds and then reimburse yourself from bond proceeds once we close. And so in talking to Kim, there will be some expenses that you've paid for in the past 6 months or so that you'll be reimbursed for from proceeds of this bond issue.
How far before the bond process like this can you make that commitment by an ordinance ahead of time? How far can you go? Can you go 2 years, 1 year?
You can go, you have to adopt the resolution within 60 days of making the expenditure. So in other words, when we adopted the resolution back in, I believe it was August, first part of August, maybe the 4th, you can go back 60 days from that point and pick up anything that you spend money on, as long as it's part of these projects.
So it would reach back early June then?
It would, yes.
and it was mainly on the construction, at the fire station number 1 there. So,
On page 21,
Larry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. On page 21, you talked about some things there, and I don't know whether I fully captured all of that in my brain. On page 21 of your ordinance.
Yes, sir. The construction funds and the requisition process.
Yeah.
Okay. So there will be 4 construction funds, one for each of the projects that will be held by Banco ZK, and there is a requisition that will be signed by the mayor or the finance director. And then if you look in the second paragraph, subsection B of section 15. The fire chief must sign for the Fire and City Administration Complex Construction Fund as well as the Fire Construction Fund. The street supervisor will sign for the Street Construction Fund and the police chief for the Police Construction Fund. So there is a requisition stating that the city needs to make a payment of, let's say, $300,000 to Company Y. That requisition will be signed by one of those individuals, depending on the construction fund that it's coming from, along with an invoice will be submitted to Bank OZK. Then Bank OZK will actually submit payment for that $300,000 directly to the company. So, again, very similar, exactly the same as what was done back in 2020 for that sales tax issue.
For this building.
For this building.
Correct. Thank you.
Craig?
Are we needing to make a motion for suspend the rules for third and final?
You will have to if you move ahead,
Well,
but,
that's,
so we'll be, as soon as we're ready, absolutely.
okay, well, I'm not trying to jump the gun. I didn't know, was there any more information?
I'm here as long as there are questions.
Okay, well, I didn't know if there was somebody coming up behind you or.
Yeah, I don't believe that there is.
Okay.
Yeah, I wanted to mention just a couple of things. I really appreciate Ryan. Is there any more questions for Ryan? I want to make sure. Okay. I just want to mention a couple of things. This council approved to go ahead on August 4th, and then the voters approved in November by over 70%, which I found very gratifying. So since either of those times, this deal has only gotten better. The interest rate has gone down. When we first talked to Cheryl quite a while ago, the interest rate was around 4.8%. And I thought, yikes, that's high. But I was pretty confident we're going to get some rate cuts out of the Federal Reserve. And we did. So to have an interest rate of 3.76% is a good feeling compared to where we started from. Second thing is the payoff is much faster. Now they're talking about if our sales tax remains the same, doesn't increase, but just remains the same, if we paid off in 7.5 years. And originally we were thinking 9 or 10 years. And, the amount on the taxable side, and they did tell us when they first gave us the estimates, Ryan Bowman and Cheryl both said, if we're conservative, we give the highest possible number. But they said the taxable side, which is paying off the two loans, the revenue bond and the 2020 bond, would be 11.3 million. And now it's only 8.73 million. So it's way better than what we started with, is my point, I guess. And of course, getting the credit rating in AA, I found that very gratifying. Our first bond was AA minus, and then we got an improvement about a year ago. So it was a whole new process this time, and we figured we'd get one of those two ratings, and I felt really good about getting the AA. So just wanted to point out those things that, we feel good about how this transaction is going. I think it's really very conservative, and pretty impressed with how fast it may be paid off. So, Larry?
And the credit goes to our residents in Bella Vista who buy online, because that's likely where the largest increase in generation is. So we thank you all out there. Keep on buying.
So if we're ready, we would like to have a motion to suspend the rules and go to third and final reading.
I would make a motion to suspend the rules and go to third and final reading of this ordinance. Do you need the ordinance number?
No.
Second. That was a motion by Larry Wilms and a second by Travis Hart. A roll call vote on the motion to move to third and final reading.
Suspending the rules.
Right. Suspend the rules and move to third and final. Council members Wilms,
Did you read the title?
There's no debate allowed during the roll call.
Okay, yes.
Hanschel,
Yes.
Harp,
Yes.
and Newport.
Yes.
Motion carried, 4-0. I'll read the ordinance for the third and final time. An ordinance authorizing the issuance of sales and use tax bonds for the purpose of financing and refinancing the cost of capital improvements, pledging collections of a 1% sales and use tax to pay the principal of and interest on the bonds, prescribing other matters relating thereto, and declaring an emergency. Jason, do we pass the ordinance and then do the emergency clause after?
Yes, sir. That's a separate. Oh,
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve if there's no discussion. Make a motion to approve ordinance.
Second.
That was a motion by Larry Wilms to pass the ordinance and a second by Craig Hanschel. Roll call vote.
Councilmembers Wilms,
Yes.
Hanschel,
Yes.
Harp,
Yes.
and Newport.
Yes.
Motion carried 4-0.
so at this time, Mayor, you need to entertain a motion to adopt the emergency clause.
Okay. Could we have a motion to adopt an emergency clause so it'll be immediately effective?
Make a motion to adopt the emergency clause.
Second.
That was Craig Hanschel and Travis Hart. Roll call vote on the emergency clause.
Councilmembers Wilms,
Yes.
Hanschel,
Yes.
Harp,
Yes.
and Newport.
Yes.
Motion carried 4-0. I appreciate that. I believe that's all of our business for tonight. I would like to thank the 4 council members who were able to attend tonight. I was never more happy to see you. So, meeting's adjourned.